Hello, everyone. Welcome back to PSF. We are Secular Soapbox, and we have strong opinions from a secular perspective. We like to share. I am Bryce Aroni, and I'm here alongside with my co-host, K-lub. And I don't know about you, K-lub, but I am loving the view out here. I mean, I am broadcasting from my quarters in my, new Starship, and it's pretty awesome view back there.
I can't help but brag for you. I absolutely love your new getup, man. I've been saying this since the moment I saw it.
And you look like you're in a dark basement. So the topic we're going to be talking about today is time, which is kind of a speciality of yours, right? In terms
of sorts, yes. Something that I've spent a lot of time, no pun intended, discussing. I've had some discussions with a long time studying. I've had some discussions with people and some email exchanges with actual PhDs. Some of them are names that people would probably recognize about this. One of them, Sean Carroll, has The Great Courses, if anybody is familiar with them. Great stuff. Again, no pun intended. He's got one on time. What is time from a physics and a little bit of a more philosophy of science standpoint, and it's very, very good.
Sure. So you are a YouTube content creator. How long have you been running your channel, and what is your intent and goal behind what you're doing over there?
I've been actively producing content for 10 months, I'd say, right about 10 months. What I try to do, the main thing that got me interested in doing it was hearing, especially as it concerns some of the more advanced and oftentimes at least seemingly esoteric areas of science, quantum mechanics, quantum field theory, relativity, cosmology, origins of the universe, things like that. A lot of people would say things and either say things that are just blatantly wrong, or say things that aren't necessarily wrong, but say it in a way that doesn't do the idea any real justice. So I felt, I'm not a professional in this subject, but I feel I'm well read, and it seems that I can recognize when people aren't communicating these ideas very well. Well, if I don't think they're doing very well, then I think that I'm obligated to step up and try at least to do better. And so that's what my goal is.
So if you don't mind me interrupting here, what percentage of this would you say is these people being blatantly wrong versus you talking to people that have theories that you believe to be wrong, but might not necessarily be wrong? Like, for example, other models that are as fast in this.
I don't know if I could put a percentage on it. Obviously, I don't really think there's a dividing line between them. I think it would be more of a gradient from ideas that are not wrong or incorrect, but either maybe conjectural or communicated in a wrong way, and then that slowly moves gradiently to things that are just outright bullshit. And things that would fall into that category would be things like consciousness causes the wave function to collapse. No, that's not true. Other things would be things, like the Earth is flat. That's also something that isn't true. 5G can give you cancer. That's also not true. The Big Bang is the beginning of the universe. That's also not true. There's a lot.
Sounds like you're doing a lot of debunking of common misconceptions.
Yes, but the form in which I do it, primarily, or at least that I try to and would like to, is just by communicating what the science actually is. This is what it is, and this is what it says, bar none. And I think that doing that is the best way to give people an understanding of an idea. I think that also removes a lot of the biases that might lead people down particular paths and allow them to think about these things themselves and maybe develop their own ideas and potentially revolutionize the field. And I think that that's a lot of the people that have revolutionized various fields of human thought throughout all of history. I think that's what it was. They learned these subjects in a way that didn't feed into, or at least not any really strong sense or meaningful sense, any sort of bias that could have led them in a particular direction, allowed them to think about these things their own way, look at these things from their own framework, develop their own ideas, and then go on to revolutionize the fields. But that's just my particular opinion on that matter. I would say I've been interested in science pretty much my entire life. I've always been interested in looking up, I guess you could say, and asking questions about the things that I see when I look up. I wouldn't say that my interest in astrophysics and cosmology really kicked off until I, interestingly enough, found William Lane Craig and the Kalam Cosmological Argument. I think that's what, because I was, for the first 19 years of my life, I was a Catholic, a devout Catholic. So that argument is, to this day, still my favorite theological argument. And I think that's what really kicked off the interest. And then as I began to delve deeper and deeper into these fields and talk with people who know significantly more than I could ever possibly hope to know, I think I just started seeing the holes in these arguments. And this is going to sound really, really pretentious, but I do think that for myself, I did rely on these arguments for my belief more so than maybe some other people would. Because once I began to find the holes in those arguments that my faith began to really deteriorate. And I've had enough conversations with people who run these arguments that when I point out these holes and I get them to a position where I know they know, even if they don't admit it, I know they know the holes are there, they still believe, they'll still turn around and run the same arguments. So for me, I started looking at these things and realizing that I don't think I can reasonably conclude that God exists from the framework of the knowledge that I have anymore. So my belief changed. I don't think with the vast majority of people, they're just, I just don't believe in God anymore. That's not how it works. It's a slow, strenuous, and emotional process. And I was probably an agnostic for most of the process and then moved into atheism. I would also call myself now a naturalist, and I have people like Sean Carroll and Aaron Ra, who we were talking about backstage for a little bit, to thank for that one. Just the arguments that they give and the way that they examine the world and the kinds of questions that they ask. So it's definitely been the needle moving from one end all the way to the other, from devout Catholic to staunch naturalist. That's literally 180 degrees.
It really is, and I want to applaud you for that too. I know a lot of Catholics, and honestly, the mystery, pure faith, all of that, the worst that I believe that theology endows on people, a lot of that really is seen by the devoutly Catholic. I mean, these people believe some really absurd stuff. And it goes into the Kalam, like you had mentioned, but it goes into, it gets really bizarre.
It was hard.
I find it very interesting, Leo, that you mentioned the Kalam cosmological argument as being very important during when you were a believer. Was that something that you had heard for the first time from William Lane Craig?
Yeah. I believe it was his debate with Christopher Hitchens. That was the first one that I watched. And he presented the contingency argument, the Kalam cosmological argument, the teleological argument, the moral argument, and the ontological argument, which at that time were the five that he gave. And I would say that,
I think there's more than that now.
Oh, no, he has more, but those are generally the five that he gives.
Right.
When he's at least, back in the mid-ish 2000, 08, 09, 10, stuff like that. And I think that just re-solidified the faith that I had. And I was every bit a William Lane Craig acolyte. We've all met them. We know what they're like. I was like that at one point. Yes,
Did you go into that debate looking for reasons to believe? Or did you go into that debate honestly willing to listen to the other side to see if there were reasons to not believe?
Yeah, well, I knew about Christopher Hitchens, so I was not walking into this debate expecting to walk away with a stronger faith, to be completely honest. I'm like, this is Christopher Hitchens. Like, dude, I'm not an atheist, but I know who this guy is, and he knows how to parlay with an individual in a convincing manner. But I was watching, and let's all be honest, we can disagree with him, and we all do, but William Lane Craig also knows how to parlay. He knows how to he knows how to debate. He does. He's very skilled at it. He can be very convincing. And yeah, I heard William Lane Craig talking, and I'm just like, holy shit, this guy
Did you think he won the debate?
William Lane Craig. I would say even today that yes, he won the debate, but that's a whole different discussion because I judge winning or losing a debate on a variety of different things, much like an actual judge would. And one of those things, or at least I shouldn't say it's not one of the things. It's just that not actually very important is how correct you are. That's really not considered in formal debate and when it comes to considering the winner. So,
now, Leo, let me ask you this. Have you since seen further debates with William Lane Craig and other interlocutors where you thought that he had lost or presented arguments that were not as compelling?
His debate with, well, same arguments. It's William Lane Craig. Whether it's the same exact arguments in every debate, maybe not, but the same set of arguments that he makes, he pulls from that. His debate with Peter Milliken, he lost. His debate with Stephen Law, he lost. And obviously his debate with Sean Carroll, he lost.
Yeah, and I think he just recently, it wasn't a formal debate, but it was an informal exchange with Alex O'Connor, which I thought
they had a discussion on the Kalam. Yes, that was very good.
It was very good, but none of William Lane Craig's arguments were new. And It seems like every time he encounters a new debater, they offer different reasons for why he's wrong, and he doesn't change. He's still beholden to the same argument. So I feel like you should have new counter arguments, try to shore them up more. And I think he's kind of, I don't know if he's given up on it or if it's just a paycheck now or whatever the case may be, but the Kalam clearly doesn't work. And you and I were recently on a YouTube program where we talked about Kalam with Khalil Allah and a team of mostly Muslims on the EA show. And we weren't on at the same time, so we didn't get to interact. But I did watch the part where you were on, where you started talking about time and how the different theories of time, the B theory in particular, is not necessarily consistent with the Kalam. So maybe you can explain that to us, because the theme today is time. We want to know, well, before I do that, what is time?
It depends on what definition you want.
Exactly. So
the definition,
which is why I asked the question.
The definition I would give is that time is a physical dimension and a manifold in which events occur, much like space.
Wow. So that's interesting. So time is okay. I want to hear what else you have to say about this. What are your preferences on A versus B theory?
Definitely B theory. I'm a B theory and a staticist, so I believe time is static. Time, there is no flow to time for the same reason. We endure in space-time. We're extant in space-time and also extended through it. All right, but so it does not flow around us.
Slow this down for me. What is A theory of time?
A theory essentially states that there is temporal becoming to objects, that they most literally come into existence in time when their existence begins. So they would be coming into space-time, enduring for some period, and then moving out of space-time existence. In the primary atheoretical, there's a variety, like, so a lot of moving spotlights or growing block theorists might not agree with that entirely, but
under the A theory of time, and I know you don't subscribe to this, but I'm just trying to make sure I understand the people who are arguing for it, understand their arguments correctly. Things come into existence and they can go out of existence. What would be an example? What would be an example, according to the A theory of time, of something coming into existence and or going out of existence?
Your birth and your death.
Okay, so I was born, but the being that was born pre-existed the birth.
What?
In other words, I was
yes.
I was a fetus before I was born. So was the fetus I? Or did I only exist after I was born? There was no, like, the fetus wasn't me?
See, I think And this is where it's hard to argue, to try
I'm
to
not
steel
expecting
man.
you to be able to defend it, but if
Yeah,
you
but
can steel man it.
it's hard to steel man, because there could be an atheists who are atheists, but if we're making the presumption that it's a theist, a classical theist, they would probably take some sort of substance dualist perspective and would say that's going to relate to when a person comes into existence, and they would state that probably.
That's the
I mean, if they're Christian, they would say that you come into existence at conception.
Okay, yeah.
So
and then,
I guess we could just use that for the sake of the discussion as an arbitrary starting point or defining point.
Sure, and I guess
an atheist on this spectrum here, you could say that obviously you might probably have existed, but clearly you did. But that wasn't. It's not something that has always been. That there was a moment where you didn't exist, regardless of how you want to define you, being the collection of, and like your DNA. At a minimum, I think we can say that your DNA is you. Okay, so there was a time and place where your DNA didn't exist.
Is it? Because your DNA is essentially copies of the DNA from both of your parents.
Precisely, but their copies aren't you. It is the conglomerate. It's the combination of the two in a particular way that makes you. At a minimum, at an absolute reduction.
So it's an arbitrary beginning to you. It's where we decide you begin.
But if you were an atheist that wasn't taking some sort of theological approach, you could say that potential outcome was always a possibility, but it wasn't guaranteed. However, it came to be.
Nevertheless, the material is there and always has been there, as far as I can tell. The DNA, the structure that built the DNA, was there in your father's sperm and your mother's egg, and their DNA was there in the beings that preceded them, and so on and so forth. Right back to
the argument. The argument that I would make is that, given what we know with relativity and with quantum mechanics and quantum field theory, all moments of time is tenseless. All moments of time are equally real, so they don't all exist at the same instant. That wouldn't make sense, but they exist. The whole concatenation of temporal events exists as a set. There aren't parts of the set that don't yet exist. That's just not how it works. So there might be points you could look at in that set where some particular thing it's not extended through those particular points, but there are points in that manifold where it is extended through. So to say that it doesn't exist or it comes into existence becomes meaningless. It always exists somewhere in that manifold, and if existence is to be in that space-time manifold, then even if we're not extended alongside that thing to be experiencing it, it's still in that space-time manifold, and thus it still exists.
And this is
so to say begins to exist is a meaningless statement. Anything in the universe always exists in the sense, not always in a temporal sense, but in the sense that it is in space-time. You might not be able to experience it, but it's in space-time. It exists.
So it is fair to say that at some point, relative, if we're going to think of time on any measurable scale, that at some point, something like plutonium didn't exist. It couldn't exist. There was no place for it, etc. And because of that, we now have to conceptualize the space of which. What does that mean? What is the significance of this? How do we think about this in terms of existence unto itself? So there's two ways, as far as I can tell, of thinking about this. If you're a B theorist, such as myself, this is what I believe. I think that all of everything already does exist. Time is essentially an illusion. But if you don't adhere to a model like my own, so far as I can tell, that puts you in the atheist camp, which is to say that there was an actual point which, no matter how you looked at things, if you were in that moment, plutonium just didn't exist. But under my model, if you were in that moment, technically plutonium does exist because of all of everything that ever will and has been and is existed. So that's essentially the only two real differences, or not real, but the only two, excuse me, I keep saying only, the two most obvious differences between the different models is that at some point in one model, it is actually the case that it can be stated, if you were there and then, that plutonium doesn't exist. Nowhere in nature, period. End of story. It simply doesn't exist at all. You can theorize its existence. It has the potential to exist, you could claim, but you could not say it actually exists. Under the B theory that I adhere to, if you existed at that exact same moment that we had that argument in A theory, you could say, well, technically it does. We're not around yet to see it exist. But
exactly. Yes.
Yeah.